All right, this is another part of Atlas's 36th session. It's part 2 where we're going to just start working on lunging and a little bit of desensitizing to the whiplash on his pole. So I'm just beginning here asking him to lunge around me. So I want to kind of push his belly out away from me, and I want to also kind of push him over and then but also draw him toward me so that he goes around in a circle. So here I'm pushing his body sideways, so he's taking a nice step over. But then I need a little bit forward. There he goes. Very nice circles. So he wants to stop and get stuck and come in, but I'm okay with that. I just want him going forward, so that those few steps he was a bit more forward, so I'm going to click and feed those. The other set that I was talking through, he also took a couple good steps forward, so I click and fed those too. But I'm just kind of holding my ropes kind of diagonally, or my whips diagonally. And just asking for that belly to go over. So I'm going to change directions, kind of push some pressure toward his shoulders. And then again, I'm going to kind of lift my whips a little bit and use that belly to go over. So I'm going to click him for that. He went forward and around for a couple steps. So I'm just kind of showing him what it is that I want, because he has not lunged before. This is his first time. He doesn't really know what he's doing. So I'm just kind of show him like, yes, this was what I wanted. And then I'll ask him to go out on the circle again. So really, the clicker training is helping me out here, because Atlas wants to stay here. So he likes being somewhat near me. So the draw I have is a lot. So, and he's got that nice bend to his body. So that's really, really helping me out here. So it can be a lot more challenging with a horse that you haven't clicker trained, because they will want to tend to leave you more, and then you spend a lot of time trying to draw them in. So that's just something to think about there. I'm going to yield his hindquarters. Very nice. So he's doing a decent job here. I clicked him for yielding his hindquarters, so I'm going to go ahead and feed him for that. So I would make sure that you're clicking and feeding for once the horse is kind of moving over and going forward. So we're going to really look for that forwardness, because Atlas was really stuck on just kind of moving sideways and didn't really understand that what I really wanted was him moving forward and then keeping that arc in his body. So we're just going to do that little tiny lunging lesson, because he really did a very good job for it being his first time. And I'm just going to work on a bit more desensitizing with the whips. So I'm specifically using my driving whip because it has that shorter lash. So I've tossed this lash of this whip and the lash of my lunging whip all over his body, besides up like past midway on his neck, because he does get worried about it. So like that time it was about midway up his neck, and he let I'm trying to pair what he thinks about the whip. So every time like it touches him and he stays somewhat relaxed, I'm going to click him for that. So I'm just trying to associate it with something positive. So he does get a little bit worried about the lash touching kind of up on his head and his neck and his ears. So that's what I want to work on. He's fine with my hands. It's just that lash going over his ears. He doesn't like it kind of sliding behind his ears, and he really needs to feel that sensation for the reins, the halter, the bridle, lots of different things. So it's just something he needs to get used to. So again, he was somewhat relaxed, and I'll click him and feed him for that, and just kind of try and associate and pair the lunge whip touching him on the pole and the neck as something that's good and positive and not terrifying. So right here in the beginning, I'm just kind of working my way up. So I start kind of at the base of the neck by his withers, and then I'm going to work up. I'm about midway by his brand, work a little bit further. That was really nice. He stayed nice and relaxed there, kind of in the same place. I'll click him for that. So that was quite good. So he stayed fairly relaxed. He kept chewing his hay, so he's not super tense where they would stop chewing and just kind of freeze. His neck didn't really move at all, so I'm really happy with that. It looks good. So you can tell he's showing some calming signals here. He's trying to calm himself. He had a little head shake. He's going to rub his nose on his leg and then go into grazing. So he's going back to that grazing mode. He decided to kind of take a step, so I'm just going to yield his hindquarters and bring him back here to me. So repeat the same thing on the other side. I'm going to start at the base of the neck and then work my way up a little bit. He's a little worried. You can see that neck's up a bit. His ears are following the lash, and he's really watching it, and he kind of moves like a little bit. He kind of jumps a bit every time that lash kind of touches his neck. So he's not super comfortable with it. There, I'm going to click him and feed him. He was okay with it, so I'm going to click him for it. He wasn't horribly worried, but he definitely wasn't relaxed. But I just want to make this positive. So every few times here, I'm just clicking him for it. So when I shot the video, I started with the mixture of positive and negative reinforcement. So that's why sometimes like I toss it on here, and then I toss it in again, and then I'll click him for some of them and then not others. As you can see throughout the rest of this video, which you'll see soon, he still is worried about he's like, oh my goodness, he's going to move his head around. He doesn't like that it's touching his ears. He tries to kind of escape it, tries to shake his head there, get it off of his head. He kind of accepts it, but he's not moving super quickly here. He's trying to calm himself, kind of trying to lick himself. I should have gave him a pause there and not kept going here. But this is hindsight, so we're trying to learn from this experience. But anyways, what I was trying to say was, as he kind of goes through this training process, he's making some progress, but not a lot. So later on in these sessions, I do start pairing every touch with the lash with a click and a treat. So that's just something to think about. But it's interesting to see how he deals with it with this version versus how he deals with it with just pairing a click every time. And it would be interesting to see what he would do with just the negative reinforcement, but I have a feeling I know exactly what he would do is he would just run away the first time, because I'm not communicating anything to him like that it's okay. If I would toss the lash on his neck, he's just gonna be like, oh my gosh, that's scary. And I'm not communicating with the click and the food that, okay, this is okay, this is what I want. I want you to stand still and be brave and let this touch you. I don't really have a great way of communicating that's not super forceful and making him yield his hindquarters and kind of moving him around the pen a lot and kind of making him stand for it. So that's just something to think about while you watch through the video. So he isn't horribly worried, but you can tell that he's kind of raising his neck up every time that the lash comes up. So you can tell that he's a little bit concerned about it, but I feel like the more he gets toward his pole, like right there, the more concerned he is. So go ahead and yield his hindquarters, ask him to come back. So he does listen and he comes back. I feel like that probably caused a bit more worry in him than was necessary. So that's where I'm kind of showing you the difference. Like I used positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement this time. Like later on, I'm just going to use positive. This is a little taste of what I think it would be with just the negative reinforcement. So in those previous few times, I'm just having him come up toward me and lead toward me. That's the pressure toward his hindquarters. He was showing me before, like, oh, I'm not super comfortable with this, where it was about 3/4 of the way up his neck, and then I just went ahead and put it right behind his ears, and here he's showing me like he's definitely not ready for that. So when your horse is showing you those behaviors where he's got his head up and it's tense, I'm just going to have him yield his hindquarters here and face me again, and then I need to start over a little bit. I have him come up and then kind of start further down his neck. But when your horse is showing you those behaviors, I'm just going to make friends again. Be like, remember this? It was on your face. It was on your neck. It's not a big deal. But see how that backslid a lot? Like I had to go back and really reassociate this with him. So I had to rub him on the face, rub him on the neck, instead of just paying attention to those behaviors in the beginning. That's why like this isn't the perfect video, but it is really good to learn from, because you can see, okay, these are the things I did wrong. This is what I can improve on. These are the behaviors to look out for. And I think it's a good learning tool. So I should have paid attention to those behaviors in the beginning. The head raise, he's trying to calm himself. He's definitely in a worried state. He's not horrible, but I feel like a lot of horse trainers and riders, we don't think it's horrible until the horse is actually over threshold and we see the behavior as leaving, like running off, like he did, like spinning and turning to leave. And here I'm just treating him for having the lash up on his neck a couple times. Or you see other behaviors like rearing and bucking and bolting and other kinds of things when we could have, we saw things earlier like these small behaviors, but we basically have to make them yell at us. And obviously I'm not perfect at it, and I should have listened to those behaviors early on, but I thought it was really good learning tool. So I don't need him to yell at me. He's yelling at me now when he ran off and was like, I am not okay with this. And when he's here and he's got his neck up high and he's worried and he's kind of twitching every time I touch him with the whip, that's showing me that he's not comfortable. Like as soon as I took that lash off there, he shook his head and licked his lips. I didn't even give him a moment to like come all the way back down. So you see he's doing it again. As soon as that goes away, he's like, oh my gosh, it's gone. And then as soon as it comes back, that head comes up and he's tight again. So he's like, oh no. And then he's not really associating anything super positively here. And I'm sure if I kept going in this same way, we would reach the end goal and feed him here. He stood still a little bit better here. I would reach the end goal, but I do think, like you'll see in the further on later on videos, where I clicked and fed for every touch of the lash, that went a lot faster. And I feel like it would have gone even faster if I didn't do this part that you're seeing now. If I started off from the beginning with either listening to him and being like, oh, you're not comfortable with this, don't keep going, or pairing it from the beginning, every lash touch equals a click and a treat. Because I think there was some undoing that I had to do in that process and it made it a bit slower, but you can tell through this, and then there's a few other videos that I'll be posting of this process where it just is taking longer than it should. So obviously most things are going to work if you continue to do them and repeat. A lot of negative reinforcement trainers are like, you just need to work your horse every day, twice a day, 7 days a week. And it's like, okay, is that super realistic for us? Is that fair to them? Not really, but you will get results with that amount of time. Most people don't have that amount of time, and I don't want to put my horses through that much training. So I think it's important to find a different way to do things where you don't need to put that much time in. So if you're working with something with your horse and it's becoming this, wow, this is taking a long time, I don't see any improvement, even if it's small, then maybe we should change something. So now he's standing decently. He's not swinging his head around, and I've kind of backed up a step, and he's just letting me touch him behind the ears on his poll with that, not the lash, the stick of the whip. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of waiting him out. I kind of see if he would kind of lower his head a little bit. So the blending of the negative and positive reinforcement can be tricky because it's a lot of things to think about at once. This is good here where he can just kind of hang out, lick his lips, relax, go back to that relaxed state. And it's taking him a little bit here. You can see how many calming signals he's got here. He's shaking his head a lot. He's blinking a lot. He's licking his lips a lot. There's a lot of tension in there. So that's really why I wanted to show this video. And then it's hard to sometimes get out of old habits of like, I just put the whip up there and then just wait until he relaxes, because he had so much tension. You can have two options. Like they might relax and you might teach them some learned helplessness. Like you cannot escape from this. So you better, you might as well get used to it, or they can just leave and explode. And learning from the Mustangs is like when they leave and explode, like there's nothing you can do. There's just nothing, like, especially since they've had halters on, but they're not halter broke, like leading wise. Like you're just kind of like at their mercy. So you have to kind of get more into their language and communicate a bit better with it. So definitely, if you want to learn a lot about horses, get yourself some Mustangs, because definitely learned a ton. So it's pretty cool. But just pointing these things out so we can all learn from them and get a little bit better. But so I'm doing a good thing here. I'm starting off lower down his neck, and he's cool with that. He's like, I'm not okay with this. He's backing up. He's like, oh, I'm not so sure. And I'm still kind of stuck in my old horsemanship ways, so I'm kind of following him. I'm like, no, I'm going to keep going, even though I should stop, pause, just wait, be like, it's okay. Go back a little bit further, put the lash kind of on his withers, maybe click him, treat him there. Do that a couple times, and then try maybe a couple inches above his withers. And then if he's like click and treat there, and then go from there and build progressively up toward his pole. But like I said before, this whole Mustang thing is an experiment, and I do think that I got a lot of knowledge, I got a lot of good footage and a lot of learning experience from this. So that's why I'm just sharing it with whoever wants to learn. So I think it's interesting with that. Atlas does now accept this on his poll. This is an older video when I'm voicing it over. But it is very interesting to go back and see the whole process and be like, oh my gosh, I should have done that, or I should have done this. So it's a pretty cool opportunity to do that. He does accept it. I had to go back and redo and click every time it touched him, which was a little bit harder. And I should have kind of done that from the beginning, definitely. But I thought overall it was a good video to share and kind of show all the things that I've tried and what we've learned from this. But we're going to work on that. That's enough for today, and we'll move on to the next thing.